Hey everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Every Horror Movie on Netflix, the podcast where we watch, review, and discuss every horror movie on Netflix. I'm Patrick, and I am back after a quick bye week this episode with Chris, as always.
Hey, how are you?
And there's no Steven, but there's a Colton. Hi, Colton.
Better than Steven.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Colton is our guest this week. We did something kind of special for this episode. You probably all heard us talk about our friends at the It Slays podcast before, our horror fam to the north in Canada. And we realized that we were both planning to review Mike Flanagan's Hush sometime this month. So we decided to do a little wife swap, as Steven called it last episode.
A crossover episode.
A little crossover, yeah, exactly. A little crossover stunt. And send Steven over to It Slays to review Hush with them, and have Colton from It Slays on our episode to review Hush with us. So you'll get a little taste of the It Slays vibes this week, and we definitely encourage you to go check out their episode on Hush too, because I haven't gotten to listen to it yet at the time of this recording, but I am sure it's going to be a banger. Colton, do you want to tell us a little bit about It Slays? Pitch it to the Amon faithful.
Yeah, sure. It Slays podcast, I think we've been going for 2 or 3 years now. I'm a recent addition to the crew, just joined back last fall. But essentially, we just each take turns choosing a horror movie to review every couple of weeks. And it's more of a laid-back discussion. The guys used to have a couple of drinks on the show, that sort of vibe. You know, we've tried to get slightly more buttoned up and professional as we've went along. But we still try and keep things light and fun and just have a good time discussing horror.
So tell us a little bit about yourself. I mean, what kind of got you into this, and kind of what's your experience and background in being a horror fan?
I've gotten the podcasting probably within the last 4 or 5 years. I had my own little show that, you know, only ran for 23 episodes or so with a couple of friends here in St. John's, Newfoundland. But I was following It Slays right from the beginning. I was a patron on their Patreon, so just kind of watching along with whatever they were reviewing or interacting with their posts. And eventually they brought me on as a guest for the review of The Witch, because I think it won a poll, or maybe it was my pick. I can't even remember, but I went on the review of The Witch with them, and it's kind of been a recurring guest on and off ever since. In terms of horror, I've been a fan of horror definitely since high school, where we'd have like those watch parties with friends on the weekends. But I remember like watching Ghost Ship when I was a kid and being essentially traumatized from that dance scene with the wire in the beginning.
Okay.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, you've got to be about our age, because I remember I saw Ghost Ship like on DVD when I was in like 8th grade at a friend's house. I was transfixed.
I think I was maybe a year or two younger than that, but yeah, we rented it from like the video store, brought it home. It was a sleepover on the weekends, and yeah, I was kind of terrified from Ghost Ship. So, a fan since then, I would suppose.
I feel like I need to see Ghost Ship now.
Just watch the first 3 minutes.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, as one hell of an opening scene. I don't know about the rest of the movie if you really need to see that.
It's all downhill after that.
Duly noted.
Yeah.
Well, Colton, it's great to have you here, and we'll kick off this week's episode before we jump into our Hush discussion, as we usually do, by doing a little horror catch-up. And Colton, since you're the guest, I'll call on you first. What's been going on in your horror life lately? What have you been reading, watching, or just experiencing, out there in the horror of the world?
Yeah, like honestly, I usually watch a lot more than this, but I've been completely consumed by a game called Elden Ring. I don't know if either of you guys are gamers or not, but
oh yeah,
the last two.
Let's just talk for an hour about Elden Ring.
I easily could. I have like 100 hours in that game in the last 2 weeks. I'm hopelessly addicted. But in spite of Elden Ring, I did manage to check out a couple of horror movies. First of which I rewatched Fresh, which I know Steven just discussed on your previous episode, so I won't get into it too much, but, I did enjoy it. I think the performances are great. I'm really excited to see what Mimi Cave does next. She has a very distinct style and voice, and, I mean, if you're a horror fan and you have Hulu or Disney Plus, I mean, you don't really have a reason not to watch it. You should definitely check it out. But more importantly, in preparation for today's main review, I decided to go back and kind of take a look at Mike Flanagan's filmography.
Hell yeah.
Yeah. Specifically, a couple of years ago, I wound up missing a pretty big movie of his called Gerald's Game. So obviously you guys are very familiar with Gerald's game. I had to go back and take a look at your, I think it was your 5th episode of the podcast ever. And
Yep.
I would say, I'd say by and large, I was probably a little bit less favorable towards it. I did think, like, obviously it's well shot. I think that one gore effect is, oh my God, it made me squirm so bad.
Oh, yeah.
It's a doozy. And yeah, like the 2 main performances are completely captivating. But I don't know. I definitely felt the length as it went along. Like I was checking my proverbial watch, after about an hour or so. And man, that epilogue, I think, the less said about it, the better, in my opinion. So I think it's fine, but it's not one of my favorites in Flanagan's filmography. That's for sure.
The Moonlight Man definitely turned into a bit of a meme for us for quite a while after we watched that movie.
It was a choice.
Yeah, it's such a good shot the first time he's revealed, but then, I don't know, like consistently keep using him, and then when he's in the broad daylight, it's just, it looks off.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess that's kind of the point, right? You take this guy who's scary, and then you put him under the fluorescent lights in a courtroom, and you kind of take his power away, right? But it's, something that maybe works better on the page than on the screen.
Yeah. For sure.
I haven't really been watching anything. I don't really have anything to report. It's been Elden Ring for me as well.
Nice.
And also it wasn't that long ago since I recorded the last episode, so I don't really have anything new since then, but that's okay. You can just skip me today.
We'll forgive you.
I have not been playing Elden Ring because it sounds like a huge pain in the ass that I would rage quit after like an hour because I have no patience with video games.
Yeah, I've been hoping that you could ask me about Elden Ring, and I could do what Tony Soprano says to Robert Patrick when he's trying to get into the poker game and be like, "This isn't the game for you, man."
Oh yeah,
I like you. You're a friend. This isn't the game for you.
I don't even need you to tell me that. But not playing Elden Ring has freed me up to read the Final Girls Support Group by Grady Hendrix, best known for the Paperbacks from Hell collection, which is a nonfiction book of bizarre and offbeat genre paperback covers from back in the day. But he's also a fiction novelist and wrote this very entertaining, very gripping, page-turning novel about literally what it sounds like. It's about a support group for 6 final girls who all survived murder rampages back in the 70s and 80s and are still, processing the trauma of that and the way that it's affected their lives. And just when they thought they were all safe, something or someone starts brutally attacking and harassing and pursuing all of them. So I've just been burning through that because the characters are all really interesting and well drawn, all kind of thinly veiled versions of different famous slasher movies. It's very good. It's very fun, nicely drawn characters, and obviously just written by a huge horror nerd. So would recommend that, as long as it doesn't take a shit in like the last third, because I'm only 2/3 of the way through it.
Yeah, I've heard nothing but good things about that, and I have a friend who's a huge fan of Paperbacks from Hell and the Final Girl Support Group, so as far as I know, it doesn't take a shit in the last third, so hopefully you'll enjoy it.
Good to hear. All right, well, let's get into the main attraction for today. We're returning to the Flanagan well. There's some Fanagans on this show, maybe even some Stanagans, if you've been listening for a long time. I've been wanting to watch Hush for a long goddamn time, or rewatch it, really. So I was excited to dig back into it. It's a simple movie. We were talking about this before we started recording, but, as Chris said earlier, the premise kind of is the plot. You've got Kate Siegel, Flanagan's wife, and certainly one of his regulars in... Introducing
Kate Siegel.
Oh, is it her first role? Okay, wow, yeah.
I got that noted as well. It's
nice.
Pretty wild.
Nice. Yeah, so she plays a deaf woman who lives pretty isolated existence in a house in the woods, and she's being stalked by a killer. That's pretty much your premise right there.
She's come to the woods to get away from the big city and work on her second novel. Her first novel conspicuously being Midnight Mass.
Dude, I lost my shit when I saw that.
I know.
Like
me too, man.
10 years prior to Midnight Mass becoming its own Flanagan production. It's in here. I have a question, though. Obviously, there's references to Midnight Mass. Is there anything familiar about the way they describe the book if you've seen the series.
Yeah,
I mean, it's actually the same story.
The character names are the same, and I mean, they don't really get into details too much, but I think they reference things about like the church, and somebody says something about how they were trying to predict the ending and they didn't really see it coming, which I think is pretty appropriate to the series because it certainly has a pretty shocking ending. Yeah, there's all kinds of stuff where it's like, okay, did he have this whole story in mind and planned out back then, or did he just kind of build he had to have had it planned out back when Hush came out. Do you know anything about this, Colton?
Yeah, I actually know. So apparently Midnight Mass was what he wrote as a novel before he even got into like filmmaking or anything. I think he was trying to make it as a novelist. So he actually wrote Midnight Mass in its entirety as a novel and never got it picked up anywhere and never got it like brought to a big publisher. And I guess in this movie, Maddie's character is, thinly veiled in some ways of like himself as a novelist. But when I was looking on the page, like it does seem like certain things are different because when she's working on like the endings of the novel, and this actually seems to be a sequel to Midnight Mass, what she's writing. And if you look at the character names, certain people that aren't around by the end of Midnight Mass are around for the sequel novel. So I'm kind of really curious, like, did Mike Flanagan write like maybe half of Midnight Mass as his first novel, and then he had like, the second one in mind with these characters that were going to carry over?
Yeah.
Regardless what it is, it's a super interesting kind of well, it's not an homage. It's just basically foreshadowing for what's going to come in like 5 or 6 years after this point. You have Maddie, played by Kate Siegel, who's going to then play Erin, and she's discussing it in this movie.
Right.
Like, as a horror nerd, I was just like, oh man, this is awesome.
Well, and she's discussing it with Bev from Midnight Mass as well.
Yes, of course. Yes.
It's just, I was, my little Flanagan brain was just lighting up at the Mike Flanagan cinematic universe implications. And I also realized, and you probably noticed this when you watched Gerald's Game, but Midnight Mass also shows up in Gerald's Game briefly. The book is on the shelf over Carla Gugino's head.
He's just had it in his head all this time. He was just waiting for the technology to catch up to his vision.
I mean, also in this movie, there's Dr. Sleep on the shelf. Like, obviously, it shows like a collection of King stories, but Dr. Sleep kind of has like prominent positioning as well, which then Mike Flanagan, in a year or two after Hush, goes on to do Dr. Sleep.
Yeah.
So I don't know. This is a weird little movie.
Some of those details eluded me. I watched this before many years ago, and then when I was rewatching it for this episode, I started watching it in the middle of the afternoon, and I couldn't see a goddamn thing. This is maybe one of the darkest movies that's ever been made. So at some point, I had to take my laptop into my bedroom and watch it on there. But like, if you're talking to me about set dressing in the first half of this movie, it's once the sun goes down, it's anybody's guess what was on in the background of these rooms.
Yeah, once the sun goes down and once her power gets cut, it is dark as shit. I was bumping up the brightness on my TV because I also watched it in the middle of the afternoon. Both of us flagrantly flaunting your rule, Chris.
My one rule.
Yeah, your one rule about watching horror movies is you have to watch them in the dark.
Yeah.
But yeah, it struck me watching this. It's an interesting movie for Flanagan because I feel like it's really kind of his simplest movie, and also it's almost a slasher. It's probably the closest he's ever going to come to making something like a slasher. I would think. And there's not. I guess I want to say there's not a ton of thematic depth to it. He's always playing with faith or grief, or he loves playing with that emotional stuff. And there's not so much of that in this. It's a very simple, very tight little 80-minute movie.
Well, yeah, I find a lot of Flanagan's work, when it kind of all boils down to it, winds up being about love in the end. Usually, if it's a TV show, the last episode or two almost kind of subverts all horror tropes, and it just becomes all about love, to which loads of horror fans kind of get a little bit aggravated with it. Where this, I guess to a degree, it could be about love in terms of like, oh, she's deciding maybe to get back into the dating game. Like, there is Craig, trying to call her, who I guess is some sort of suitor or something. But I mean, it's not there. It's not really text, right? You kind of got to go looking for it. Like, basically, this is a movie about a killer trying to kill a woman who's in a house. It's very simple.
It's very much like sort of a Hitchcock sort of story. And the thing, I actually like that about Flanagan, where in most of his other work has some sort of you could say maybe cheesy sort of Hallmark-esque energy that comes in late, and that's kind of just been something that's been endearing to me about all of his work. But yeah, it's really not here. This does feel like a more primitive effort from him, and it's not his first film, but it's one of his first films. And I think, did this get released directly on the Netflix? I think it did.
I think so. Yeah.
Yes, it did.
Yeah.
And it came out right around the same time as Oculus. And Oculus was released theatrically, but ended up on Netflix very quickly, I think. So I remember that, that's how I became aware of Mike Flanagan, because these movies were sort of topping the lists of the horror movies you have to see on Netflix. You gotta watch Oculus and you gotta watch Hush. And then I was like, oh, these are the same guy. Oh, this guy's interesting. He's an up and comer, and now he's more mainstream. And so I have to. He doesn't feel as. I liked it better when he was just the guy I knew about. But whatever.
It is interesting because I do love, like you said, Chris, Flanagan's penchant for the Hallmark moments and the heartstring tugging, but I still really like this. It's just a different kind of movie for him, and it's also kind of a lightly drawn character. We get like maybe 5 or 10 minutes of kind of introduction to who this woman is, the relationships in her life, and then it's just your main understanding of her is just seeing how she responds to being terrorized by this guy who's outside her house, and it's just a game of cat and mouse for 70 minutes, probably almost the entire movie, which I appreciate. I like the smallness of it, and yeah, I like it.
Yeah, I like that about it as well. You guys said it's very simplistic, in terms of its thematic resonance, but it's also just short. It is it's a very easy watch. You're in and out. It doesn't kind of belabor the premise. It doesn't try and do some flashbacks, which sometimes are unnecessary, or like you said, it's missing the Hallmark moment to try and make this bigger than what it is. It's just a simple, taut, and you can call it a slasher, I guess, but it has a very low body count for a slasher for sure. But it definitely does lean into the gore effects for sure in the movie. But yeah, that's what I like about it as well. It does feel a little bit out of place, honestly, in a lot of the rest of his filmography, especially as of late.
Yeah, and it's it's a gimmick movie too, in the sense that it's built around a character who can't hear having to evade this killer. And I like movies like that. I like your Don't Breathe, that kind of setup where there's a specific sort of sensory limitation that puts a twist on a concept that you've seen in different forms a zillion times before.
Like Bird Box.
Yeah.
Oh no, I don't know where you guys stand on Bird Box, but we shouldn't get into that discussion.
Well, we have an episode on that too.
Chris just said Bird Box so that we can put in the sound cue.
Yeah, of the calling birds. So as far as the character being deaf goes, you said it was kind of a gimmick, and I think I kind of agree. It sort of feels like a gimmick, and I'm not really. Certainly the movie is sympathetic to her and to the condition of being deaf, and I think it's not a disrespectful portrayal by any means, but I kept asking myself, why does this woman have to be deaf? Because outside of a couple key moments, it doesn't really motivate much of the action.
She has to be deaf for basically a couple of
or
key
the
moments.
theme.
Yeah. Well, I think she's also mute, right, in the movie?
Yes.
Is that correct? They talk about the meningitis that made her deaf spread, so she also doesn't have vocal cords. So I think just as a horror trope, that kind of adds a little bit to me, because, she can't scream for help or anything either, right? She's basically... well, what a lot of people would probably consider in a horror movie is a sitting duck. But that's the interesting thing about the character, is that she is so resourceful and intelligent and winds up kind of surviving, or
maybe surviving. We'll have to wait and
surviving. See. Yeah, we'll have to wait and see.
You'll have to find out in the spoiler room.
Yeah, she's a lot better of a final girl than some other final girls I've seen, despite what some people might consider as limitations.
Right. Right.
Yeah, that is an interesting point, though. The movie doesn't actually exploit her being deaf all that much, for large stretches of it. I'm comparing to something like Bird Box or like Don't Breathe, where every scene practically is built around, like in Don't Breathe, not being able to make a sound. And there are only a few scenes in this, I want to say, that really relate to her being deaf, where it materially changes what's going on in the plot. And yeah, I don't know that I have like a conclusion on that. It's just interesting to choose that gimmick and then not necessarily do a ton with it.
No, I mean, there's some key moments. There's certainly some key moments.
Yeah.
Talk about outside of spoilers that, like, obviously death matters, but I think it's kind of just like the selling point of the movie almost. Like, this is what makes this one slightly different from all the other home invasion thriller / horror movies we've seen before.
Yeah.
I think what happened here is Mike Flanagan was making dinner with his AirPods in one night, and his partner Kate Siegel came outside the window and scared the shit out of him. And he was like, "What if this made a good movie? Let's do it." Or vice versa.
Yeah.
She had the AirPods in, and he scared the shit out of her. Because I mean, that's really the most interesting part. Because and that's how we find out that she's deaf. Well, one of the ways we find out that she's deaf is right at the beginning. She's cooking dinner, and we have all the close-ups of all the sounds that you hear in the kitchen when you're cooking. But then in her world, we see she's not hearing any of it, and she talks to her neighbor friend. And shortly afterwards, the neighbor is trying to get her help and pounding on the door and screaming because she's being stalked by a killer, and she's just obliviously making rice, which, man, that would piss me off if I were getting murdered. And
I was just in there making rice while you were pounding on the window.
Right, with your AirPods in. But it's a good scene, and it's the kind of thing. Listen, last episode we were talking about how this movie Eli sort of like seemed like it was all just kind of set up for the twist they came up with at the end. I would much rather have a movie that like where the inciting incident is an interesting idea than like we have one interesting idea, but it's gonna be the end of the movie.
Yeah. Yeah, and the inciting incident happens in the first 10 minutes or something, 15 at most.
Yeah, and where you kind of referenced Don't Breathe earlier, where that movie kind of makes so much of just its house, the design, the production design, they kind of exhaust everything you can kind of do in a house.
Yeah.
I kind of feel like this movie exhausts what you can do with this character in this house as well. Like I said, she's very resourceful and, trying to leave and getting forced back in and, trying to fight back. It's for what it is, and it's very simple premise. It keeps me entertained for the hour and 20 minutes, whatever it is.
Yeah. Well, and that's the interesting thing, too, because I think it was you, Colton, who mentioned that, her being deaf is sort of the hook for the movie, essentially. And I think, there is something interesting to the fact that isn't the only thing the movie rests on. It is the hook, but it's not the entire skeleton of the movie. What the movie rests on is this character being, as you said, very resourceful, which I always love to see that in a movie.
Oh, me too. When they're one step ahead of you.
Yeah, where, because what's the cliche about horror movies, just yelling at people like, don't go up there, don't do that, whatever. And I love a movie where you just have a smart character and not a fucking like superhero or like ex-military or something. This is just a normal woman just thinking straight, coming up with the best ideas she can in the moment to try and get out of this situation. And it's interesting to watch.
Mm-hmm. Misery is one of my favorite movies for the same reason. Just when you have someone in a situation and they're smarter than you are, and it's always a good time when they're like, "Oh, that's a good idea. Yeah, they should do that." Oh, it doesn't work because in Misery, the captor is kind of an idiot, but in this one, the killer is always a step ahead. He's smart too. He cuts the power, he steals her phone, and she's trying to connect on her computer to the Wi-Fi at the neighbor's house, which is very smart of her. Mm-hmm. He's got her phone, and he can see that the neighbor's network is password protected. Mm-hmm. And then there's kind of a little stare down where he's like, all right, do you have the password? And she doesn't have the password. Great stuff.
Yeah, and the villain is interesting, too, because he shows up in this mask that, honestly, I found extremely creepy. Like, that mask is way creepier than like fucking Michael Myers to me. It's a creepy mask, but he takes it off in the first 20 minutes, which is another sort of interesting subversion of your expectations. This guy is going to be someone she knows or something, but it's a nice way to kind of up the stakes, because she writes on a window in lipstick and says, I haven't seen your face, like basically leave me alone, I won't tell anybody because I haven't seen you. And he just takes the mask off, and it's a great like oh shit moment, both in the sense that he doesn't give a shit if she sees him because he's like, I'm gonna kill you no matter what, I don't care. And also in the sense that it is a completely random person. You know, there's no twist where it's actually her brother or her ex or whatever. It's just completely random psycho just out killing people in the middle of the woods. And that was very alarming to me.
Yeah, I was so worried that, like, it's been a while since I watched this. I watched it when it first got released on Netflix. So I was so worried that, like, there's going to be some goofy twist where it is, like, I don't know, her ex-boyfriend or something like that. But then when they unmasked him, like, 20 minutes in the movie, I was like, oh, shit, all right, we can't have that twist anymore. Like, that's out of the equation. Not to mention, it's such a ballsy choice to unmask your killer because one of the common, like, horror critiques is that people find most of the time when you unmask the killer, they're no longer as scary. Or if you do too much like backstory or setup for the character, like you know, the killer is no longer scary. That's the big critique of like the Halloween movies and the you know, the Rob Zombie ones in the mid 2000s, right? It's like we get too much information, too much backstory. They're no longer scary. They're sympathetic in a way. So it's interesting that they unmask this character, but he's still sinister and he is still scary.
And he's more interesting, I think. And the actor, John Gallagher Jr., does a great job of portraying him. And for me, there was like just enough character in his expressions and his physicality that I could conceive of what kind of guy this person is and what he's doing and how he lives and why he's out in these woods. But it was all basically in my imagination, but it felt believable. And I'm sure you guys, you know, kind of came up with your own fan fiction backstory of, you know, who this guy is. But it gives you just enough that you can kind of make out who this guy is without really telling you anything about him.
I was thinking like maybe like National Guardsman and definitely a hunter, you know, because his weapon of choice is crossbow throughout the film, which is also interesting weapon choice.
That's I think the one thing that's explicit is that this guy's got to be a hunter because he's got his crossbow, he's got his knife, but not only that, but knife, like he knows how to cut you too.
Yeah,
you know.
Yeah, for sure.
You know, obviously there are, as we said, a lot of sort of resourceful choices and decisions that Maddie, our protagonist, makes throughout the course of the movie. Do you guys have any sort of favorite moments, favorite little tricks or traps she pulled off on our guy?
I like the moment when she's on the roof and throws the flashlight.
Yeah.
It was a moment in the movie, like when she does that to kind of distract them just away from where he was in the front of the house, that I was kind of thinking like, oh, there's going to be a mistake here. Because when we cut back to the wide, it's like, obviously he's going to be able to see her on the roof. Like it's kind of going to be dumb. But when we cut back to the wide, she like clearly threw the flashlight and then laid prone, so she like knew that he couldn't see her, like when she was laying on top of the little outcrop. And I was like, okay, that's pretty clever.
Yeah,
she did a lot of the stuff that I do like in video games. If I'm, you know, playing Call of Duty and there's like a 3-man squad hanging around me and I don't have any weapons and I'm hiding, you know, I'll throw a smoke grenade in one direction, then I'll run the other direction.
Yeah.
Did a lot of that kind of stuff, and that was good. That said, because she was so smart through most of this movie, there were a couple occasions where I was like, why isn't she doing this? Why isn't she doing that? And they kind of loomed large for me. Just because for the most part, everything was so tight. Like, you know, he apparently disables her car by slashing the tires, but I'm thinking, given the situation, just get to the car and drive it on the fucking rims. Like, what's the worst that's going to happen?
It's only on the one side too. He only slashes it on the driver's side, I think, right?
Are you trying to protect your resale value or something? Like, just fuck the wheels. Just get out of here. What's he going to do? You know?
She never got the tire and rim warranty, so you know.
Yeah. And then another part later on where I was like, oh, I really wish she were doing something here besides what she's doing. We'll talk about that later.
I liked when she just slams his fucking hand in the window at one point. And Flanagan has a thing, I feel like, with mangling hands.
Yep.
And he's
sure does.
And boy, has he given me a few memorable hand manglings at this point.
Yeah. That's another thing that's really kind of cool about this movie, because she is so outmatched. She can't hear. This guy's got her house surrounded. He's bigger, he's stronger, he's faster. He's got a crossbow, he's got a knife. She's got no help from anybody. She's really quite fucked, to be plain about it. And because the odds are so insurmountable, it makes these little tiny victories seem so significant and emotional. You know, just like her slamming the guy's hand in a window. It's like, okay, great. It's like fighting a boss in Elden Ring, Colton.
It's the same thing after beating your head against the wall for hours, and you just get that, you know, that one perfect run. Yeah, you're
or not even
excited.
that. It's just like you get that one hit, that one chip off the life bar, and you're like, okay, yeah. I can beat this guy.
Yeah.
How did you guys feel about Kate Siegel's performance?
Fantastic.
Yeah, I thought she was excellent as well when I was watching her. I think she's better in this than some of the other things I've seen her in, specifically like Midnight Mass, I guess, is the most recent one. I really like Midnight Mass, but I wouldn't say like her performance in it is specifically spectacular or anything. Like, this movie kind of lives and dies on her performance, or with the character so much. We really need to, you know, be able to get what she's emoting, especially since a lot of it is, you know, signing, or a lot of it is nonverbal, obviously. So yeah, she's excellent in this movie, I think, especially as introducing Kate Siegel, you know?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I always have a hard time figuring out how I feel about her, because obviously I've seen her in a lot of stuff, because I've seen, I think, everything Flanagan's done, and she's in most of it. She has like such a just sort of like stereotypically beautiful face. I don't know. There's something about her that seems like slightly like a little uncanny valley or something to me. I have a little difficulty relating to her sometimes, but I also do think she's a good actor. I don't know. I just have a complicated relationship with her that's sort of hard to describe, I guess.
Sounds like, yeah, I can't, that's above my pay grade, Patrick.
I was going to say, like, she reads to me, just like by looking at her, she reads to me as like cold and like calculating, which for this character I think works perfectly. For certain other characters that she's played in the rest of Mike Flanagan's work, like, I don't know, the pregnant wife in Gerald's Game, she has a very limited role. I'm kind of like, what are you doing in this role? Like, you don't fit this role very much to me at all. In this movie, I do think it works. She definitely works for me.
Yeah.
So according to Wikipedia, this is a movie that Flanagan and Siegel kind of developed together, and
yeah, they co-wrote it, right?
Yeah, and they developed it by acting it out in their own house.
Wow.
So go ahead, I guess. I'll get into it in a minute, yeah.
Wikipedia says that actually ended up being a problem because they based so much of the script on their own house that when they went to Alabama, of all places, to shoot the film, which was probably done for tax purposes, they could not find a house similar enough to theirs and had to significantly alter the script.
I have a thing with Mike Flanagan movies where I can almost tell what character he like wrote himself as, or kind of based aspects of it. There's always like kind of like a basically almost bald man with kind of like a 5 o'clock shadow in so many of his works. And when I saw this, I was kind of like, okay, I know this was a very small budget. I know that like Mike Flanagan and Kate Siegel wrote this together, and I never read the Wikipedia, but I was like, I bet to a degree he designed the aesthetic of like the creepy dude or the killer off him. Riley in Midnight Mass, when I watch it, reads very Flanagan to me as well. And it's weird. Like, sometimes I can almost like see beyond the movie I'm watching that like, oh, this is the self-insert character in some regards, you know? I don't know what that's saying about him putting himself in this movie as the killer, but maybe it's just, you know, working with his wife or whatever. I'm not sure. But yeah, it's a little strange sometimes.
That's another thing I liked about the killer, because he doesn't really look intimidating, and he doesn't look larger than life. I mean, we're not, this isn't Don't Breathe, where we have fucking what's his name?
Oh, fucking Stephen Lang.
Yeah. This isn't fucking Stephen Lang.
It's not Gerald.
This isn't Kane Hodder. It's Gerald. It's not Neville. It's a guy that you can like could imagine seeing on the 6 o'clock news, where it's like, yep, someone was in court today for like killing his mom.
Yeah, he's not like physically imposing. He's not weird looking. He's not Freddy Krueger. He's, you know, the scariest thing about him is just the fucking look in his eye, and that he is willing to terrorize her until she wishes she was dead, is literally what he says to her. And that's at least as scary, if not scarier, than a Jason or a Michael Myers or whatever the hell.
Because that's the thing, and that's another thing that maybe we should clarify or talk about. We believe, and he explicitly says, he can get in this house whenever he wants.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he can break the window, he can come in, but he's having fun. He's toying with her, and he's getting off on just menacing her. And so he's kind of got that arrogance about him where he's just kind of outside trying to be spooky, and she's inside trying to figure a way to get out of the house. And he doesn't really get aggressive unless it's to keep her from leaving the house. When she goes outside, then he will fuck her up until she goes back in the house. But he's just having a good time. This is sport for him. The conflict in this game isn't she's trying to keep him on the outside of the house, keep him from coming in. It's like she's just trying to escape, and he's trying to just play with her until he gets bored and then kill her.
Yeah, he's very much just toying with her the entire time. He's one of those killers that it's almost like as things get more frenetic and kind of spiral out of control, it almost seems like he enjoys that to a degree. Obviously, in the latter half of the movie, when some things happen that are out of his control, it's almost like there is like a satisfaction in it, and then still like getting the one up on the, the character in the scene. It's like, you can tell he's like reveling in that, right? Like he enjoys it. That's an aspect to the character that it's like, yeah, there's so many parts in the movie where it's like, yeah, he could probably just break in through the window and get her, but it's like that wouldn't be fun. That'd just be, easy for him. He's like a sport hunter, basically, like what you said, what we talked about with the crossbow. Crossbow isn't really a weapon you use for a killing shot a lot of the times, as we hear and is discussed in the movie. It's it's a slow process a lot of the time. So
it's also thematically fitting. It's a silent weapon,
of course.
It's not a gun, and so there's the practicality where he's not going to be shooting and the neighbors are going to hear, but also just we're talking about a character who lives in the silent world, and she's being shot at with a silent weapon. He's also he might be something of like a masochist or something. There's parts where he gets hurt and it doesn't bother him the way you think it would.
Oh, and she just fucking stabs him with that hammer. That's a gnarly bit too.
He gets, he incurs a whole bunch of minor injuries throughout this movie and a couple major injuries. And you think that it's each one you think is really going to put him away for a bit, but he just seems to relish in it. So yeah, really kind of a striking performance, striking villain, and a lot more interesting than I think where a lot of movies would have taken this kind of character.
Yeah.
This isn't Ghostface.
Yeah, not so much.
No, not at all. And I think some of the developments in his character as well as the movie goes on, I think is interesting as well. Like it winds up being very much like, oh, this is a very intelligent killer, like methodical as well. Where in the first scene where he's kind of like reading the door, he almost reads as like illiterate or a little bit like almost like developmentally like stunted or something in the very first scene to me. Like the performance is very weird compared to where he is at some moments in the third act. So I was rewatching the scene before we recorded just to make sure I wasn't like crazy, because he kind of feels he develops throughout the movie as well. So he just felt a little bit off to me in the first scene, and by the end he's very different. He's a fully formed character by the end, or a fully formed killer at least.
Yeah.
Well, it seems like we're kind of flirting around the edges of talking about that third act. Yeah. So maybe this would be a good time to review it and then head on to the spoiler room.
I think so. Colton, do you want to kick us off here with your review? View it, cue it, or screw it?
Sure. So I think this is a view it for me. I have very, very minor nitpicks about the movie that do not detract from it for me. It winds up being one of those movies where it's like it's only like an hour and 20 minutes long. It's paced well. I think the performance by Kate Siegel is excellent. I love all the little references to Midnight Mass and whatnot, and how unflinchingly brutal it can be at times. There is a moment or two that makes me squirm a little bit in this movie as well, very similar to Gerald's Game. So yeah, I would say view it.
If you were on It Slays podcast, would you give it a yay, nay, okay, or slay?
On that podcast, I'd probably give it a strong yay.
Okay.
I wouldn't give it a slay. In my book, slays are reserved for like what I'd call like almost like a masterful, it's a hallmark of horror, where I think this is just a very, very good movie, like teetering on a great one of these movies.
Chris, how about you?
I'm going to give it a view it too. I mean, I could pick a couple nits. There's some things that I guess feel underdeveloped to me, but besides that, it's almost a perfectly executed movie. It's scary. We haven't really said that, but I think it's scary. True. It's scarier than a lot of movies we watch. It's got, the gimmick of her being deaf is quite interesting and used to great effect early on and then at key moments throughout the thing. I like her character, as kind of thin as it is. We've said enough about the killer, but just a really sort of indelible character and performance there. It's just good stuff. It's just good stuff all around. And yeah, real efficient, respects your time. And I wish there were a lot more movies on Netflix like this. Like, I would like to see these sort of low budget, tight, well executed spook shows and thrillers on Netflix rather than what we typically watch. You can't go wrong. Good job, Mike Flanagan. I give it a view it. Patrick.
I'll join the View It crew, of course. Love Flanagan, love this movie. I love the efficiency of it. I love how it's almost all action, but somehow still manages to have characters that feel well drawn, as we've been talking about, and characters that you do care about. Yeah, I just kind of feel like you can't do too much better than this as far as, just a quick and dirty, intense thriller. I enjoyed it very much.
Wow, unanimous view. It's a rarity.
That's right. So I guess it's time to head on down under the spoiler porch and spoil everything from the third act. But before we do that, as usual, I'll remind you to go check out our broken website, everyhorrormovieonnetflix.com. Send us an email message there. Tell Chris to fix the website. We need to keep the lobby going.
I've been working on this website like Maddie in this movie's been working on her second novel. I sit down, I open it up, I do a FaceTime call, I cook dinner, I hang out with my neighbor, I do another FaceTime call, I look at it some more, I say, I don't know how to fix this, I close the
Someone
computer.
Murders your friend in the background.
Yeah.
But yeah, go check out the website. We've got a list of every or most of the movies, at least, that we've watched out there. We've got a link to our merch store where you can buy t-shirts and other such paraphernalia with every horror movie on Netflix art on them. Also, follow our social media. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. We love to talk to you out there and have discussions with all the audience, all the listenership about each of our movies that we watch. And lastly, go to your podcast provider of choice, leave us a review. We love to see the feedback, and it helps people find the show. All right, guys, you ready to talk some spoilers?
Let's go to the spoiler room. We'll be back in a second.
All right, everybody, we are back. We're hiding out under this creaky old spoiler porch to break down all the spoilers from Hush. And again, it's not like a super spoilery movie, but we love our spoiler room break. We love that narrative format. So we're going to dig into some of what goes on in the third act. And I think one of the most notable developments is we meet an additional character fairly late in the movie, and things don't go so well for him.
Yeah, Dean Cain shows up. Dean Cain shows up as the boyfriend of the neighbor.
It's not Dean Cain.
It's close enough, though. Close enough. He's got big Dean Cain energy. He shows up. He's the boyfriend of the neighbor who's the first person who we see get got, and we're like, all right, finally a strong man is here to solve the problem. But he immediately gets bamboozled by the killer, who shines a light in his face. I believe it's the same light that our hero throws off into the woods to distract him.
Yeah.
So if only she hadn't done that, Dean Cain would be alive today. our killer shines the light in his eyes and puts on his best impersonation of a police officer, and is able to intimidate him into, you know, showing his ID, making him think that he's a cop, a sheriff's deputy who's responding to a call. It's pretty. I mean, I don't know what you do in that situation. I guess you believe him, right?
And Dean Cain asks some good questions. You know, it feels like a very realistic scene because the killer is so plausibly making it up as he goes along, and Dean Cain is like very plausibly trying to respond in the best possible way, even though his bullshit detector is going off. It just has a really like tense, nervy, like very realistic kind of feeling to it.
Well, when he gets caught as well, isn't he like looking in through like the window or looking in through the door? Like, you know, with a light getting shined in your face, he almost looks like a home intruder himself, right? Like Dean Cain does. Right. So it's the type of thing where it's like, yeah, you'd be completely caught off guard. And I think the movie might go like maybe one smidge too long about him not questioning, like, why are you just dressed like a regular dude?
Yeah.
But why do you have
I'm
a
glad
neck tat?
Yeah, I'm glad they address it at least, you know?
Yeah. The performance, it feels like he's 90% sure there's something not right about this guy, but that's not sure enough to like act out to a sheriff's deputy given the circumstances.
Right.
I think there's also like, I'm clearly bigger than this guy too. Like, you know, if he tries anything, it's probably like that. He just believes he'd be able to fight him off or beat him, you know, mano a mano or something. I don't know.
Right. Yeah. So then he starts being real smart too, and he starts basically putting the killer into a situation where he's going to distract the killer and beat his head in with a rock, because he realizes that this guy's got blood on him. Not only that, but he has like an earring that belongs to his wife or his girlfriend who is missing. So he's like, all right, let's dispense with the pleasantries here. I need to kill this guy. And he's about to do it, but then our hero starts banging on the glass. She doesn't know what the hell is going on, and it's like that scene in Glengarry Glen Ross where the guy comes in and he has remorse about buying the real estate, and Al Pacino is like, "Don't worry, it hasn't gone to the bank yet," and then Jack Lemmon comes in and is like, "No, we sent that to the bank this morning," and it's just like that. Kind of an arcane reference there, but yeah. And he says, "Don't open your mouth unless you know what the shot is." That's what Kate Siegel does, and just the whole thing goes wrong.
It's crazy too, because she doesn't talk for the rest of the movie. When she opens her mouth, she says exactly like Al Pacino. It's crazy.
Anyway, so Dean Cain gets his throat slit, but still puts up a fight. And this is the part where I was like, all right, Kate Siegel, Maddie, if you will, needs to be doing something else here, because Dean Cain has our hero on the ground. He's taken his back like in the UFC, and he's trying to choke him out, and Maddie's just watching it happen. And with a little bit of help, I think they could have killed this guy together in that situation.
I forget, does she have the crossbow at that point?
No.
Okay.
She has it, but she's been unable to.
But she doesn't have it loaded, right? Yeah.
Yeah, she's been unable to load it.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I mean, you wouldn't be able to get that shot anyways. You'd have to be a sniper to get that. Like,
yeah,
but she can. I mean, she has a bad leg, right? But I feel like she could have hobbled out there and gotten into the fight. And between Dean Cain choking the shit out of this guy and her being on top of him with a rock or a knife, maybe it could have gone differently.
Dude, I don't know. I mean, like, he gets Dean like right in the jugular from square one. Like, Dean is absolutely fucked, you know.
Yeah,
there's
but
no coming back from that.
Too. He says, doesn't he make a remark about it, or he says something like, "Oh, you know, it was a lucky strike.
Oh,
you know,
yeah.
If I never got that, you would have had me for sure," or something like that. I can't remember. It's a better line than that, but he says something along those lines.
Yeah.
Yeah, but Dean Cain has this guy completely compromised for a minute, and Dean Cain's trying to get Maddie to run during the opening that he's giving her, and she has, you know, she thinks that through and decides running's not a good idea. But I feel like she could have gotten in that fight. That's the one thing I was like, yeah. But you know, it's easy for me to say sitting on my couch watching a movie that she should have run out there and fought this guy. But you know,
yeah, I don't think I would.
maybe when you see Dean Cain get his throat slit, you feel like that's not a fight I want to involve myself in.
Yeah, I'm on Patrick's side. It didn't like bump for me either. I was kind of like, try and get the crossbow loaded, I guess. But I was kind of thinking, that Dean Cain is toast, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really like this scene, though, because of, again, that like very realistic tension and both of these characters kind of trying to feel each other out. And I like even just, Dean Cain asks the killer at one point, he's like, are you a sheriff's deputy? And the guy responds, I think he says something like, barely, or something like that. It's just, and it's such I love that we get such a sense of this guy as like a pretty clever and quick thinking manipulator in that moment, because he knows that he can throw Dean Cain off by, just that one word suggests like, there's a bunch of backstory, but we don't need to get into it. Like, I'm almost a sheriff's deputy, I just liked the deployment of that line, even in the way it kind of threw off the balance of the dynamic between those two. And I also liked how I felt this weird tension between like, oh, thank God someone is here to help. And also like, I really didn't want him to succeed, because it's like, I don't like, after, Maddie's been holding her own and putting up a fight for this long, like I don't want some guy to come out of nowhere and like save her ass. So it was this weird tension between like, oh fuck, he just got fucked up by the killer, and oh good, Maddie gets to finish this show out,
This was the scene that kind of recontextualized the killer to me a little bit, because like I said, whether or not it's me misreading when he's very slowly reading each word off the door, in his first scene where he's like speaking to Maddie and like, oh, you can read lips. It like I said, he almost seems vaguely like illiterate in that scene, to this scene where he's so charismatic and so quick thinking. And so like, I'm like, oh my God, yeah, he's lying through his teeth, but doing such a great job at it that I was like, okay, I missed something at some point where like I was like, okay, maybe I misread the first scene, or maybe he was putting on a bit of a performance, or maybe it is an issue in direction. I have no clue. But this character, like this killer at this moment, I go like, okay, this is a really good killer. Like how quick he is on his feet.
Yeah, I didn't really read that first scene the same way, but even if there was something there that I missed, like at that point, maybe when he's got the mask on, he's he's playing a role a little bit.
Yeah,
and then he kind of becomes more raw as it goes on. Maybe he's trying to be Michael Myers at the beginning.
Yeah, the friend I watched the movie with, she didn't get it either. She was like, I didn't get that, so I think it could just be me. Like I said, before I did this, I went back to that scene and I was still seeing what I was seeing, but maybe I'm just seeing something that's not there as well. So, but I do like this killer, like at this point, like it's a very clever moment, like what Patrick was saying, like as they're feeling each other out and trying to figure out, how am I going to get out of this? And yes, very much as the viewer, I'm the same way, that obviously I didn't want Dean Cain to run in and save the day and be the White Knight and the movie the end and then to run off into the sunset together. I wanted to see like, all right, how's this guy going to get taken out? I was very curious.
It's funny how we want that to happen so badly in the moment, but it would be the worst movie of all time if that happened.
Yeah.
Oh, it's so bad. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so she ends up getting the crossbow, I think, after. Well, no, we established she gets it before that, which I also have to say that's another of my favorite moments, when she kind of tricks him into coming up on the roof and then just like fucking clocks him and grabs his crossbow. That's a great bit.
Yeah.
Good. I do that in Call of Duty too. I'm being chased. I climb up the ladder. I wait at the top of the ladder when they can't shoot back.
Just wait for them. Knife them when they come up to the top.
Yeah.
But she's got the crossbow. She struggles a lot with loading it because apparently that's a very difficult thing to do. And she's only got the one bolt. And we're assuming, or at least I was assuming, that this is going to be her ticket out of this, is she's going to get her perfect shot. Finally, she's going to get the headshot or whatever on the killer, and that's going to be the end of the story. But she shoots him, I want to say it's not too long after he kills Dean Cain, right?
Well, what happens is he kills Dean Cain, and she had been, because Dean Cain had been kind of telling her to run, and so we sort of see her escape and run and get hunted down and chased and her head bashed in with a rock.
Oh, right. Yeah. That's when that happens. Yeah.
But that is just in her mind. That is her writer's brain that she established at the beginning when she was talking with her friend, where she's like, I can see all the branching. She's like Doctor Strange. She can see all the branching timelines of what'll happen.
This is the one where you defeat the killer.
Yeah. Right. And through process of elimination, and there's kind of I guess this is the closest that this movie gets to sort of the like Mike Flanagan Hallmark cheese, because we kind of like see her talking to herself. And it's like, we're running out of time, honey. You got to do this. You can't do that. You can't do that. Anyway, so she basically through a process of elimination decides she can't run. He'll out chase her. She can't hide and wait it out because she'll die of blood loss because she's already been shot in the leg by the crossbow at this point.
She can't turn the power back on. He'll get behind her. Can't go beneath the house because she'll get dragged out, I think, is another one that shows, there's multiple endings. Yeah.
The only timeline in which she has a chance, basically she decides actually she doesn't have a chance. That's what she decides. She decides I'm dead, basically. There's the best percentage chance that I have is just to
try and kill him,
fight this guy and kill this guy and hope for a miracle.
Yep. And I love this convention. Like, I love this scene. I love this moment because it could be something that they set up in that first 5 or 10 minutes, and it gets fucking overused throughout the movie. But it comes back so late that you've almost even forgotten that it was set up, and it's a really enjoyable and powerful moment too, because she is so desperate and she's trying to literally talk herself up in her mind and get herself ready for the end game. not to bring it back to another fucking Avengers reference.
Yeah. And it's as close as it gets to sort of developing a theme too, I think, or a character arc for our hero, because really I after this movie was over, I was like, did I miss something? There wasn't really a kind of a thin character, not a lot of development with her. But if you want to look for it, you can say, all right, so here's someone who's, she's got no confidence as a writer. She's mute. All she has is this inner voice that she can use to create stories, but it's just hasn't been working. She can't write an ending for her story on the page, but her life happens to be saved by using that inner voice and her ability to see these branching narratives to overcome this crazy circumstance. So a little bit of a redemptive arc in that, if you're looking for it, maybe.
Yeah, I guess it could also be like the prey becoming the predator type of thing, like one of those very like basic things where it's like, it's like one of those lame themes where it's like, oh my god, they were being hunted for most of the movie and now they're the hunter. It's a very cheesy way.
And then I'll probably talk more about this later on, but maybe a little bit of garden variety sort of feminist empowerment, because I think there's a very gendered dynamic to what's going on in this movie, and we have a character who at first seems kind of she's deleting texts, hanging up on calls from men. She's avoiding conflict, and now she's got to take the conflict to the male oppressor. I think you could make that reading, and especially when you get into how it ends, I think that's in the text. But she decides she's got to fight this guy. So then we have the most suspenseful scene of the whole movie, in which the killer is about to kill our hero's cat.
Yeah, and Mike Flanagan loves killing cats too, as anyone who's seen Midnight Mass. There's a beach full of dead cats in that show. So as I was watching this, I was like, is this going to be another Mike Flanagan production where he murders this cat? And obviously it would have been too horrific, but
he's about to. And first I was like, is this the interesting character note where they're going to show us the killer who just killed Dean Cain and this other woman? Is he going to be gentle to this cat? Yeah. Because he has that side of him? No, he's like, no, I'm going to kill this cat and staple you to the front door.
What does Mike Flanagan have against hands and cats?
I don't know. He's a very disturbed
Everyone's got
individual.
their thing.
He needs to talk about this with his therapist.
Or just make more movies. That's but anyway, he gets shot in the chest with the crossbow right before he kills the cat, because off screen our hero has finally figured out how to load this damn thing, even though Even though I think we pretty much closed the book on her not being able to load this thing.
It's an awesome camera move, though. Like, it does a full 90-degree tilt as she finally locks it in. It's an awesome movement. Like, as she actually gets the bolt finally loaded after 20 minutes of trying.
We see her actually load it.
I think she has she's stepping on the end of it just the way he was finally loading it. Like, she's standing up and the camera does this tilt, it almost reframes her. Yeah. It's a very very deliberate move. If you go back and watch it, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, it really emphasizes the strength of her stretching out the crossbow and loading it. And I think Chris, it actually might be one of those upgrade deals where they just shot it in high resolution and then tilted the shot, but it works really well.
Yeah. Actually, Upgrade might have actually used a robot rig for a lot of that stuff. I don't know.
I want to rewatch Upgrade.
We were trying.
That movie's so much fucking fun.
We were dissecting the camera moves in Upgrade, and I was well, here's how I would do it, but they probably had an expensive rig. So basically, this is another thing where he gets shot in the chest, and you're like, oh, hell yeah, we stand, we clap. But it really doesn't make that much of a difference for him.
Well, I thought it was going to be a little bit more because she specifies as well in her internal monologue that she has to shoot him in the head or the heart, I think is what it says, the head or the chest. She specifies and she gets the shot. So it is a moment okay, you had 2 shots that you had to land. You got one of the 2.
Is it the
good,
chest, though?
Clap,
I thought it was kind of more the shoulder or something. Is it closer to the
shoulder? Okay, maybe.
It might be under the... it's not a place you want to get shot with a crossbow.
Yeah, but it's still not
do you want to get shot with a crossbow?
It might be right under the collarbone or something.
Yeah.
But it's not a good spot. It looks like this guy's pretty compromised by this, but he's at least putting on a strong face. Who knows? Maybe he was really hurt, but he doesn't.
He pulls the bolt out and snaps it in half. So it's okay, well, fuck, that's not gonna work,
Yeah. And so she wants to now at this point, she wants to, as they say, stand and bang. She wants to fight this guy face to face, and he comes up to the door and she's ready to take him on. He notably slams her hand in or traps her hand in the door and then stomps on her hand until it looks as fucked up as the hand in Gerald's game.
Dude, how many stomps does he have to do? He does 5 or 6 stomps, and that sound design from almost the ASMR intro comes back again, and it's so defined, that stomping. I definitely squirmed. I went oh god, you know. Oh, it's brutal.
Mike Flanagan went through his whole bag of celery in the studio.
Yeah, that's an intense moment.
Yeah, so that was pretty upsetting. And now we're okay. And another interesting thing though, we talk about these little victories that Maddie has. Every time she's making progress, she's also, for example, she gets the crossbow, and that's probably the biggest win that she's had in that movie up to that point.
Yeah.
Now, not only does she not have to worry about the crossbow, but she feasibly has a weapon that she can use against this guy. But to get the crossbow, she got shot in the leg. So there's a trade-off there. It's like Elden Ring. You can't just have the buff. There's a debuff that comes with it.
Or for those who haven't played Elden Ring, it's 2 steps forward, 1 step back.
Right. And then so I like that, and then I guess the hand thing happens too. She's taking damage. It's kind of a war of attrition, and for every progress she's making, she shoots the guy in the chest, but now she's got to finish the fight with one hand, right? So but this guy's a coward, and she calls him out for being a coward, and he doesn't come through the front door. He just goes back to circling the house. He wants to be sneaky. He wants to be a sneaky little coward.
Before he does that, though, she makes a very smart move where she goes to the laptop. And this was a moment where I was this is, how smart this character is. She knows that there's a good chance she's going to die. So she writes down the description of the killer on the laptop. So when the police eventually find her, they'll have a lead. And I was damn, most movies wouldn't take the time to actually put this in. And I was oh, okay, she's decided in her head there's a good chance she's gonna die, and I was oh, I feel this moment. This is a very strong moment. But then yes, he circles around to come into the house another way.
You don't see Kevin McAllister in Home Alone go to his notebook and write one tall burglar, one short burglar, gold tooth. I died fighting.
Well, and it's a great shot too, because she has taunted him at that point with writing coward on the window, and he goes to get a wrench out of the car, tire iron, out of the car to beat the window in. And he's in the background. I think the audio drops out in that moment, and he's just, you see the glass spidering, cracking and spidering as he tries to beat the window in the background, out of focus. And she's in focus working on the computer, typing this out. And she also types out like, "Love you, Mom, Dad, Max. I died fighting." And I got huge chills during this scene. Yeah. It's
powerful. It's good stuff.
It's powerful. Yeah. And it's another thing where you like get super invested in that character, because she's very much come to terms with the strong possibility that she may die, but she's still going to give it her fucking all and give a little sign off to her loved ones before she goes. And I was just like, ooh, I don't know. There was something I've seen this movie before. Like, I knew she didn't actually die, but I was still fully caught up in the very high stakes that character is feeling at that moment. And it's great.
I forgot that he does try to come in that door straight up. So it's not really a character thing that he circles around. Apparently he's just unable to get through that door, which whatever. We don't have to nitpick that. We don't have to nitpick it. It's fine.
He doesn't try another window. No, nothing like that.
So Maddie makes her last stand. She gets the scariest knife that she has in her kitchen, and she goes to her little bathroom where there's one way in, or so she thinks, and she sits and she waits, and then this is the other key use of her deafness, where we see her and then we see the glass shattering behind her because our guy's coming in the second story bathroom window. And he gets right in the bathtub right behind her and has her dead to rights. And then in what I think is maybe Exhibit A in my gendered reading of this movie, he gets in real close and he's, staring at her neck, and he says, "I think you've been holding out on me. I bet if I got you in the right spot, I could make you scream." The double entendre of all time. And in doing that and sort of perversely snickering to himself about that thought, he wisps her hair just a little bit. And of course, she's hypersensitive to such a thing. So she does a little Matrix move and dodges his knife and stabs him in the neck.
I think it's in the knee, actually. I think she gets him.
Oh, it's in the knee. You're right. It's in the knee. That time it's in the knee. Because it's not over yet.
No.
There's still a fight to be had.
I like that his villain monologue does him in. It's like, you could have just actually killed her there, no problem. But he takes the moment to kind of, talk to himself. It's just a classic trope, right?
Yep. He has to talk to himself. He has to toy with her a little more. He has to project sexual menace over her for maybe the first time explicitly. And then the chase continues. They go to the kitchen.
She hits him with fucking wasp killer.
Yeah.
And I don't know where that came from, but I loved it.
It's under the sink.
Yeah, it's knocked out of the sink earlier in the movie, actually, when I forget what she's rooting around for, but she does knock that out, very early.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Because early on, she's talking to her neighbor, she burns her dinner, and so she sets off the fire alarm. There's a lot of chaos. They got to turn off the fire alarm. They got to, and that's probably where the wasp killer rolls in the thing.
I think maybe when she was looking for a flashlight or something, maybe. I'm not sure. I can't remember the specifics, but yeah, it gets knocked out for sure. Yeah.
Right. So Chekhov's wasp killer
of course,
is used. Yeah. She domes this guy with it in the eyes, and you're like, oh, I'm at this point, I'm standing up. My popcorn is on the floor.
Yeah.
I'm like, cheering. We're getting those critical hits on this boss that we need. He's got, now he's got what? He's been shot in the chest. He's got broken fingers. He's got a bad knee with a knife in it. And now he's blinded. And we're like, all right. Now we got the sensory stuff coming in again, now she's deaf and he's blind. And then she uses the fire alarm, which is an not only does it have an ear piercing shriek, but it has a strobe light on it for the deaf. So now he's just completely discombobulated and in ear splitting pain. He's deaf too at this point. He's blind. He's all fucked up. A battle ensues, and now it's a fair fight, sort of. Except he's still stronger.
Yeah, and he gets her on the floor and just starts throttling the life out of her. And this is another moment where I'm like, okay, I know she survives, but it's so tense. It goes on forever, and that her gasping as she chokes is just excruciating. And it's actually, and I'm not the type of person who does this. Like, I don't yell at the screen often, if ever, but I literally, as she was being choked out and is like feebly reaching to grab a corkscrew that's fallen on the floor nearby, I just like yelled, "Get that motherfucker." I was just like so over it and just like, just stop it, make it stop. I'm tired of this fucking guy. Stab him already. Jesus.
Oh yeah, they definitely hold on that for a good moment where you're like, yeah, it's been a while since I've seen it, so honestly, I couldn't remember if it was like an ending where they both managed to kill each other. They're equal matches or whatever. I couldn't remember what the ending was, right? And I was like, obviously the corkscrew is set up right from the very beginning, so I was like, she got to get the corkscrew, but they do such a good job with it that even in that moment where she's barely reaching for it, there is like, it creeps in of like, damn, does she get the corkscrew, right? Like, it's a great moment.
Yeah.
And let me save some lives of some Amon listeners out there, because you see this in movies all the time. It bothers me. If you're ever in a situation where you're being choked like that, do not do what they do in the movies and try to like reach into the inside of the forearms from the outside and pull the arms apart. It will not work. You got no leverage. What you want to do, take notes, you want to do like a breaststroke motion and try to break the grip from the inside out, or you want to kind of fold your arms like I Dream of Jeannie, if you can get your arms above the assailant's arms and sort of do like a sit up and bring your arms down on top of their wrists and elbows. That will break the grip, especially if they're straddling you and you use your hips at the same time. But do not reach in from the outside. It's going to be like your wrists versus their whole upper body weight. You're never going to break that grip that way. And it bothers me in every movie I see it in. But I understand that most characters would probably do that in real life. It's the cop shows that bother me.
I like how you've at various points today turned this into an Elden Ring podcast, David Mamet fan podcast, and a self-defense podcast. We've got so many spin-offs here.
Yeah, well, you know, if it saves the life of one listener or buys them time from that choke, it'll be worth it. Yeah. Or maybe it doesn't work and they're just gonna get killed worse. I don't know. But yeah, he's got her on the ground. He's straddling her on the ground, both arms around the neck. Another, sort of gendered way to kill somebody. And she reaches over and she grabs the most feminine of all kitchen implements, the wine opener.
Wow. Okay.
And stabs it into his neck, and that's the end of that's how she gets him finally.
I'm gonna be thinking about the most feminine kitchen implement for a while now.
Yeah, I feel like maybe like putting him in a KitchenAid or something may have done it, you know.
Yeah.
My women friends always have the KitchenAid, you know. But,
strangling him with an apron.
Anyway, and that's that. So it's lights out for him. He's dead. And that's basically your movie, right? There's not really any falling action. Well,
yeah,
right?
she finally gets to call 911, which also feels like a huge relief. And then the actual ending of this, she's waiting for the police to arrive, just sitting on the front steps of the house looking a little shell-shocked, and the ending is just her, like a smile slowly forming on her face. And that maybe was what I least liked about this whole movie. It's like, this woman has just been through like so much fucking trauma. I couldn't really figure out what the motivation for her smiling in that moment would have been, honestly. It didn't make sense to me other than like a way for the audience to feel better about everything and to go out on some degree of like a happy note.
Yeah, it's a weird note to end on for sure. I guess like you could read into it as like, oh, she picked the right ending. I don't know. But once again, it's a very sadistic kind of way to show that, right?
Yeah.
But
should have stabbed him in the neck with a pencil, the writer's tool.
Oh my god! Yeah, bludgeon him with the math book.
With a pink pencil.
Yeah, slit his throat with the sharp edge of the MacBook Air.
Got him.
So I guess this is just her Joker origin story.
Yes, the Joker of the Flanagan verse.
Yeah, she had her one very bad day or whatever it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I'm hoping that I'm glad that it ended like that compared to, and I couldn't remember if this was in there, like some sort of like Misery-esque epilogue where it's like, oh, she's back in the city and look at her new book.
or a Gerald's Game epilogue.
Oh, right. A Gerald's Game epilogue.
Yeah.
So. But,
yeah. No, I liked that it just kind of, she killed him, got the police there, and, that's your movie. Just that specifically the moment of the smile, I thought was an odd thing to end on, and it didn't make too much sense to me.
Oh, I forgot another key piece of evidence in my gendered reading of the movie. It might be the villain's last line, but when he finds her in the kitchen, he uses the slur. He uses the word we don't say.
The word we bleeped out that Steven said last episode.
He calls her the C word.
Yeah.
Which that's gotta mean something.
I was surprised.
You don't put that in there without the very reasons you're saying. So sorry, Patrick.
And I mean, this whole thing, listen, this movie wouldn't play the same if you had a man in the house, right? Like, this movie plays, I think, on a lot of fears that women have in the society of being home alone and voyeurism and creepy men who wish to do you harm. And I'm not saying that this was written to be a feminist film necessarily, but I think that it made its in there thematically, intentionally or not. And even, her writing on the door with the lipstick, again, a very feminine defense mechanism, to write on a piece of glass with lipstick when you're in peril, and saying, oh, my boyfriend will be home. And then even though he knows her boyfriend's not coming home, he still asks Dean Cain, hey, does she have a boyfriend later?
Yeah.
Well, yeah. I think there's definitely something to that, because it's similar to what I was talking about on the Texas Chainsaw Massacre episode, where, so often, writers try and empower female characters by grafting male mannerisms or affectations onto them, and this character gets by on her own merits. They don't attempt to turn her into like the fucking action hero badass, and not that there's anything wrong with your action hero badass woman. It's just often like kind of a shorthand, I think, for trying to create, again, an empowered female character. And that is an interesting point you bring up, Chris, about how many like sort of stereotypically feminine tools she uses along the way and still manages to come out on top.
Yeah. And then, I mean, in the end, it's her own experience and perspective as a deaf woman that kind of bails her out of the situation. She notices the guy breathing behind her. Maybe she wouldn't if she weren't deaf. She uses that annoying smoke alarm to great effect. So a lot of things that may be seen as limitations or disadvantages, or maybe she sees as limitations or disadvantages, everything from her writing the novel, for not being able to finish the novel, to her physical condition, ends up paying off. It all comes together, and she kills a maniac.
Yeah.
I was going to ask, do you guys think this improves her dating life, or you think this is going to, put her off for another year?
That's an interesting question, because there's the whole thing with Craig, and Craig seems Craig is her ex, and he's such a plot point for the first like 20 minutes. He's discussed often, and she's thinking about calling him, and afraid to call him, whatever, and it just kind of gets dropped. And I'm not entirely sure what the significance of that was.
I'm not really sure what it is either. It's a little bit of, I don't know if I'd go so far to call it a red herring, but it is like, they specify on it for a couple of points in the movie, and then I think they may even describe him as a creep. Like, I feel like someone might say like, oh, the last guy you dated a year ago was a creep. Like, it might be like when she's on FaceTime.
I don't think they say creep, but she does say, speaking of bad endings.
Oh, okay. Maybe there you go. Yeah, there was something where I was like, oh, okay, interesting. Yeah. But
I mean, maybe it's a misdirect to make us think that Craig is going to show up, and then we get Dean Cain instead. And
yeah, maybe.
I don't know.
That's the kind of thing, like when I gave my review, I said there's some things that feel underdeveloped.
Gotcha.
That's one of them. That doesn't really pay off, but it's not really important. I think maybe that's there just to underscore the isolation that she's living in, on various levels. And, also the killer, he seems to be pretty isolated too. He's out here in the woods. We know from the tally marks on his bow that he's killed at least 13 people out in these woods. And, couple lonely people out there in the woods crossing paths.
Looking for love.
And the world's a little lonelier when it's all over.
All right, well, should we put a crossbow bolt in this one?
I think so. I don't really have any other thoughts.
All right.
No.
Well, what are we watching next? It's your turn to pick, I think, right, Chris?
It is my turn to pick. Please hold while I find something. I have Netflix open in another tab here.
Well, while Chris figures out what we're watching next, Colton, you want to do your shtick and tell people how to find It Slays podcast?
Yeah, sure. If you want to kind of head on over and see what our Hush review was, you can follow us on It Slays podcast on every single social media, I'm pretty sure. And, just stop on by and see what we have to say about it. I have no clue what the guy said about it. I haven't listened to the episode yet either because I don't think it officially releases until tomorrow. So I'll be listening just like the rest of you guys. But yeah, you can find us everywhere at It Slays podcast. And, thank you for having me. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah, of course. It was awesome to have you here, and we'll have to come up with more fun little stunts like this. I have to say, I, for one, really enjoyed doing some kayfabe shit and sending you guys a threatening challenge message for your anniversary episode to kick off this little thing.
Yeah, whenever we get around to fully reviewing *Malignant*, I'll push to have you on the podcast so we can get to a fight.
Colton and I have a strong difference of opinion on *Malignant*, but
yes,
we'll get there. We'll get there one of these days. Chris, do you have a pick for us?
Yeah, you want to know what we're watching next time?
Tell us.
All right. This is a fairly recent movie that I wanted to see on VOD when it came out, and I didn't, but it's on Netflix now, so I get a second chance at life. I get a second chance to watch it, and I think for next time we're going to watch Till Death.
Okay.
Oh, is that Megan Fox in that one?
The return of Megan Fox.
Oh, wow.
It's a horror, yes. And I don't know what it's about, but it has that image on the poster of her like laying on broken ice, and there's a hand reaching out of the ice and touching her.
Okay.
And I don't even want to know what it's about, but it makes me curious, and I think I heard good things about it, and why not? I gotta watch something, so might as well be something I've been looking forward to for quite some time.
I haven't seen it, but I'll be listening to your guys' discussion.
Hell yeah.
All right. Well, thanks so much for joining us, Colton. It was a blast to have you on.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks, Colton. Say hi to Rowan and Mike and Exilia for us. We miss them. All right, well, we will see you all next time for a riveting, I'm sure, discussion of Till Death. And until then, I'm Patrick.
I'm Chris.
And I'm Colton.
And we will see you next time.
Goodbye.